We start with a greasy white guy saying fucking fuckity fucking fuck in the middle of a battlefield. And trust me, the dialogue don't get much better from there. But anyway, his name is Jaskia, and he almost gets himself sliced up by a brute when suddenly everyone freezes on the spot like they're playing a game of musical statues, before he's confronted by some magical being who's wearing his face and speaking with a lisp, and seemingly showing him what it'd be like if he were a camp homosexual with nicer hair. Anyway, he's then transported to a snowy wood, where the mysterious being takes the shape of a white elf lady, who wants him to do a thing, but fuck me if I can work out what it is. Something about singing a story back to life. Or some shit. So she starts narrating said story whilst he scribbles it all down like a ghostwriter who ain't got a bat's chance in hell of ever getting paid for the gig. So she proceeds to give the story away and tells us all who the main characters are. First there's Fiol of Dog Clan, then Skian of Ghost Tribe, along with some other bloke called Brother Death. There's also two mages called Zachary and Sindril, and finally Meldoff and a vengeful hammer Gwen. Oh, and also their future leader, a hooded chap known only as the Lark. Though said Lark fella is actually a stunning and brave chocolate lady what gives a few coins to a random tramp outside a pub, and asks if this gaff ever plays some banging tunes. But he reckons there hasn't been music on the island in years. So she just says, well, you're a barrel of laughs, mate. And so proceeds to literally bring music back to the Isles by singing the shittest folk song since anything made by Simon and Garfunkel. See, this is what happens when you don't fork out for Kate Rusby.
I have a little purse, it's made of leather skin. I need a silver sixpence to line it well within.
Suddenly, some grubby fella what's had too many Stellas starts roughing up the barmaid. So naturally, the stunning and brave chocolate larky lady pulls out some shanks and lobs them at his knees, and then chucks a few more at some other fella's knees, before smacking up the rest of the goons whilst giving me a raging lob on. She then goes back to her singing without even having broken a sweat. So stunning, so brave. We then cut to some fancy kingdom called Zintreya, which I think was also the name of that hooker I met last night. But anyway, the newly crowned King Alvatir decides he wants to get to know his plebs. People, which naturally attracts all kinds of assassins and sets off a blood-soaked battle in the middle of the civilian streets. No! Luckily, some fella called Fial Stoneheart saves a princess who's caught up in the scuffle, and then totally takes her home and pulks her up in the tower. Dirty boy! So, after being caught balls deep in the kingdom's hallowed princess, this Dog Clan elfie fella, what seems to love cosplaying as Russell Tovey, gets a bollocking from his dad, who swiftly disowns him and banishes the geezer from the kingdom, as he's totally broken his oath to protect the princess, which didn't include penetrating her flange like a dollar store whore. Later, said dollar store whore gets a visit from her brother, who's totally the new king and shit, and Merwin starts ripping off a beloved sci-fi show from 20 odd years ago when she says, what has happened will happen again. And before Ronald D. Moore can sue these Netflixy twats for nicking his wicked words, she starts banging on about wanting to be at his side and making Zintreya great again. But he just laughs in her face about becoming a radicalised conservative and says he's found a fat ugly ex-king who he's totally going to marry her off to, so she can do more than just sit indoors all day reading dusty books and shit. Elsewhere, Sir Lenny of the Henrys is back, fresh from being reincarnated from another life where he was one of those forest hobos with hairy feet, who died from boredom after being forced to watch an episode of Rings of Power being projected into the sky. Or some shit. Anyway, turns out he's torn his way through the veil between worlds, where he confesses to a blue energy ball that it was totally him who tried to assassinate the new king in the streets today. But just like his character in Rings of Power, he's totally useless and so needs the help of this random blue energy ball to go and do some more of those bad things. Then we cut back to the stunning and brave chocolate lady, what loves to stab up knees, who tells that blonde barmaid all about her backstory, where she used to be a bodyguard for the royal family of Prussia, but decided to chase her true passion for music and become a travelling busker. And I promise you, I'm not making this up. The sweet blonde barmaidy girl then wishes she had a talent rather than just severe epilepsy where she sees future events and speaks in riddles and shit. But before you can say, oh god, not another walking fantasy trope, The chocolate lady gets flung into the jailhouse, where she certainly ain't going to be doing any more rocking, that's for sure. There, she gets into fisticuffs with that baddish dog clan bloke what loves sullying princesses, who she recognises and bitterly says that he stole her cousin's eye in an old battle or something. So she totally wants revenge on this mangy punk. But then they decide to have a sit down rather than do a bit of random violence, and they totally flirt while swapping more backstories that no fucker's remotely interested in. Luckily, he's quickly released after someone pays his bail, and he quickly sods right off. Meanwhile, back in Zintrea, King Altavir has a totally genius idea and wants to issue a peace treaty to finally end 1,000 Years' War. Wowzers! Why didn't his dopey ancestors ever think of doing that? And he reassures his aides that it'll all totally work out and definitely won't go wrong. Especially once he marries his sister off to that ex-king and everything will be totally sweet, bro. Meanwhile, the Russell Tovey cosplayer then thanks some guy called Shen for posting his bail, who tells him that he's needed back in the kingdom, because it's all going to kick off once the idea of a peace treaty is proposed. Apparently, this Shen guy is his cousin, and before you can say, how the fuck does that work? He then says he don't want to go home, and instead heads to the local brothel but realises he can't pay for the clunge because he's lost his silver pendant. Turns out the stunning and brave chocolate larky lass has swiped it off him and is now using it as a lockpick, and so she promptly escapes to find her sister fingering her music maker. Steady? Like Shen and that dog bloke, her sis wants her home too, because it's all going to kick off when everyone gathers for the peace treaty thing. But she can't be arsed with duty and shit, and just wants to drift around sofa surfing whilst gigging the local boozer. The lark then bursts into tears before being comforted by the sweet epileptic barmaid, who proceeds to shake and convulse after giving a tight hug. And before she can say, fuck me, my breath ain't that bad, girl, the sweet epileptic barmaid starts seeing future events and totally talking in riddles and shit. Something about finding redemption in a quest for a clan. And shockingly, we're told that the sweet epileptic barmaid's visions always come true. So after shit-talking her sister, she ends up dead after taking 2 shafts to the boob. Which, incidentally, is exactly how I ended up doing hard time after that 90s orgy went wrong. Anyway, she then gets ambushed herself, but takes most of them out on her Jack Jones because she's stunning and brave, before the dog boy dispatches the last goon and saves her life. He demands his pendant back, but she's too busy crying over her dead sister, yet forgetting to tell her eyes to produce them tear things, because they're totally drier than a nun's clunge, before they realise these goons were assassins trying to prevent these 2 warriors from coming back and stopping the armies from making a move on the monarchies. Or some shit. So naturally they agree to a trucey team up, before he takes his pendant back, and she says that now her sis is dead, she totally has to change her name because reasons. So now the lark is dead, and hallelujah, she won't be doing any more singing. Turns out her name is Ayla of Raven Clan, and she will have her vengeance in this season or the next. But hopefully this one, because I doubt this shit will be getting renewed. Later, all the monarchs of the kingdom have gathered to sign a peace treaty to finally end 1,000 Years' War. But unfortunately, a giant flying bug creature promptly turns them all into pink fairy dust. And turns out it was Sir Lenny Henry's beast acting on the orders of the new Empress, who has totally screwed over her bro and people just to get a taste of power. And before you can say, I guess she's been reading too much Meghan Markle biographies up in that tower, 1,000 Years' War is ended in minutes by just getting a giant bug creature to vaporise all the different factions at once. Meanwhile, Ayla and her dog boy sail over to Zintrea, where she gobbles up a fisheye just to prove how badass she is. Which isn't really that impressive since we just watched Matt Hancock do the same thing last month during a Bush Tucker trial. In the cafe, they overhear some plebs talking about how everything's practically changed overnight. Fjord is shocked, however, as it turns out that the skank he was shagging on the side has just killed all their families and seized the entire fucking continent. Hello, don't you just hate it when that happens? So these once sworn enemies now make a blood pact and decide to end Merwin and her beast and make them all into clay. Or some shit. And before he can say, it's now a bad time to tell you I have AIDS, we cut back to the hopelessly naive Merwin, who says that she just wants to civilise the new worlds that Sir Lenny Henry wants to conquer with monoliths and magical gateways, and totally just spread art, culture and science to the masses once the bad guys are done killing, enslaving and generally just doing a bunch of bad things. Speaking of, So Lenny of the Henrys tells a brown man in a cell called Zindril to keep doing more maths, so he can connect all these monolith things he's unearthing and conquer the Empire. Elsewhere, Ayla and her puppy Cuckboy are off to find her old swordmaster, but are rudely interrupted on their way by some random ginger infected with pregnancy, and who bizarrely asks her to do a pop-up concert. But she don't want to do no stinking gig in the middle of nowhere and without adequate acoustics and rehearsal time, and so she says, "Leave it out, love, my sister's just died," before the show humiliates a straight white man by undermining his survival skills for cheap laughs.
Bruh.
Elsewhere, Sir Lenny of the Henrys talks to that blue energy ball again about becoming emperor himself, and getting a bit of that sweet chaos magic to totally become more powerful than everyone else, and says he'll totally do whatever that glowing blue energy ball wants for him. Back in the mountains, our heroes try to convince Skian of the Ghost Tribe to come with them to retake Zindrea, and there she can also get her sword back what they stole from her after they poisoned her entire tribe years ago. But Skian reckons that they're too pussified to succeed in their suicide mission, and they soon prove it by getting their asses handed to them by an old Asian lady like a right bunch of cucks. But she's so bored of sitting around doing fuck all by herself on a mountain that she eventually agrees to go with them. But first they need to go find some other poor saps to totally help them out. And that's it. That's episode 1. Man, what an opening. My favourite part was when it ended. But anyway, on to episode 2. We start with an angry dwarf who's hunting some elf fella because reasons. And after being called a whore by some scrawny soy boy elf, she sneaks inside a medieval crack house and slaughters everyone inside with a giant fuck-off hammer. Although, because everyone cancelled their Netflix subscriptions when they thought it was fine to drop a straight-up pedo movie 2 summers ago, lingering budget cuts mean we don't get to see the little lass in action. Anyway, after the opening title card, Sir Lenny of the Henrys, aka Balor, is chilling in a jacuzzi pool, whilst his military commander Eredin tells him about how all the lower-born plebs are totally starving and shit because of some famine. Although Balor is more pissed off about that Fjord fella and the Lark still roaming about out there, and worries that their tale of rebellion could evolve into a powerful story what the peasants can totally latch onto, and then do one of them Marxist revolutions he's been reading about. So, like my pottery instructor says about my hands at the start of a class, he wants them put into clay pronto. Back in the mountains, the heroes need coins for sellswords, and so head into a bank in the town of Deadwood. Deadwood. To totally raid the gaff, but find the vaults emptier than my wallet after buying a simple burger and chips at my local branch of Five Guys. They also find out that they're totally wanted outlaws, and of course the show can't pass up the opportunity to further humiliate the straight white guy by drawing a giant dick on his face, but naturally leaving the black lady's image perfectly untouched, before the Golden Empire's goons ambush them in the back of the small bank, and Skian says the only way they'll survive is to fight as a team, and also kill all the bad guys presumably. But unfortunately, Ayla breaks formation to stab up a random soldier in a fit of rage, and unironically calls them murdering bastards as she straight up murders the bastards. Also unfortunately, Skian takes a shank because the stunning and brave chocolate lady had one fucking job, which was to stay in line, but she couldn't even do that properly. Luckily, they eventually fend off the baddies and conveniently escape down a small hatch. Back in Zindrea, Merwin is getting a little paranoid that Sir Lenny of the Henrys is totally going to off her when he's done with her, and can't believe he would toss her out like yesterday's turd all for a bit of power, despite her having done exactly the same to her own brother and people not even a week before. So naturally, someone tries to take a shot at her, but the princess is saved from death by a Jedi elf dweeb with force powers. So she chooses him as her protector,
Bruh.
and wants to go visit her people face to face, to find out more about this whole famine thing that her would-be murderer just told her is totally going on in her own kingdom. Meanwhile, in the forests, the gang try to find some herbs for Skian, who is being a right moany whinger about taking a blade to the back. God, she wants to live a few weeks in London, son. You can't move in this city without some machete gang carving you up like a common hog just for your phone and what's it. And I mean the crisps, not any kind of euphemism or nothing. But anyway, that Jedi elf dweeb with force powers comes up to the tower to visit the princess again, and she reveals that she chose him to be her guard just so he can totally spy on Balor, and give her a heads up when they decide to finally bump her off. Naturally, he shits himself when she asks him to steal a magical book from the homicidal chief mage, and reckons he's more of a Tinker Tailor soldier cuck than a James Bond type. But she just says,
"Oh, shut up, you tart!"
and get me that book, before pulling up her hood and heading on down to the mean streets of Zentreia. Down in said mean streets of Zentreia, the place is a depressing mess, with little fires raging and grotty smelly peeps roaming around. Which is almost as bad as current day San Francisco, but only slightly better because this place ain't got to the stage of needing an actual poop patrol to clean up the streets. Anyway, she spots Balor's army bloke, aka Eridin, sneaking off to snog his boyfriend. And before you can say, holding interracial secret relationship, Batman, we cut to Sir Lenny of the Henrys trying to communicate with a chubby elf, who seems to be hard of hearing despite having giant fuck-off ears. Back in the forest, we meet a bounty hunter called Callan, aka Brother Death, who's out here hunting them for the bounty and shit. But turns out the Golden Empire have taken out a village full of nice chaps who once took him in. So naturally, he quickly jumps on the vengeance train and joins their trucy team up. Unfortunately though, turns out Skian has totally been poisoned by that bloke what shanked her after Ayla broke formation, just like her old tribe got poisoned all them years ago. God, talk about cosmic irony. Anyway, Callan reckons he can take her to an illegal alien in these parts who can totally help her. So naturally, Ayla says shut up already and take us to your healer. But first they have to travel through something called the Marsh of the Mists, where he warns that although they may see strange things, it's crucial to ignore the evidence of your eyes and ears. Yes, exactly like modern day gender ideology and anything to do with election fraud. Anyway, so they enter the mist and one by one see horrendous things. Like Fiol's brother getting killed in battle before he shags a princess again, but this time on a lilo in the sea. And in a reversal of roles, this time she comes in his mouth, only it seems to be thick black oil and he sinks off into the sea. Then Ayla gets a flashback vision to her initiation into Ravenclan, which involved setting a bunch of caged kids on fire. And before you can say, that's the darkest shit I've seen since my bowels exploded on Taco Bell night, we cut back to the forest as they emerge from the mist and meet a budget Galadriel. And no, not that budget Galadriel, where it turns out that mist thing was totally a secret test, so the magic-y Meiji woman could read their minds and see if they were trustworthy and shit. Said magic-y Meiji woman is called Zachary, and her brown-skinned brother is called Sindril, who last we saw was doing some maths for Balor in a small cell. But she says to stop all this jibber-jabber because she totally has a small Asian to heal up. Elsewhere, that violent dwarf with the pet hammer seems to have finally caught up with that elf bloke what she was hunting down at the start of the epi, but sadly, she's already killed him off screen because lazy writing, bro. Meanwhile, Sir Lenny of the Henrys sacrifices a pair of kids to that random blue energy ball, when it demands a sacrifice in exchange for the chaos magics he really wants. But then it says it don't want no stinking kids, and so trolls him harder than Elon Musk does liberal journalists when she gives him a taste of the desired magics like a heroin dealer gives freebies to a smackhead, and swiftly takes it away until he brings her better sacrifices. Or some shit. The next morning, Merwin confronts Eridin in the home of his illicit gay lover, with a proposition for the High Commander of the Golden Empire Army, which is to make his boyfriend an ambassador for trade under a new regime and also legalise homosexual marriage. So they too can know what it's like to have 12 months of bliss and then 35 years of sexless misery, just like every other hetero couple in the world. She wants to get this head of the army fella on her side, so she can make a stand against Balor and tell him who's boss. And although it's uber risky, it's not like he's got much of a choice now she can expose their naughty shenanigans at any time. Back in the forest again, Zachary heals up the old Asian lady's poison wound in seconds. Cough! Now where was she when Skian's whole clan needed her? Meanwhile, Sindril tries to explain why he was working with Balor to do all them bad things, and reckons he just wanted to see a new world, and was totally shocked when the monolith portal thingies worked, but was then super disappointed because said new world was super barren, and contained a giant fuck-off hell beast and shit. So Balor locked him up and told everyone that the brown fella was dead whilst making him do maths in the small room. God, sounds kind of like every Asian parent to be fair. But he managed to escape through the monoliths, but not before he saw Princess Merwin slit Fuel's sister's throat. And he's so angry that he don't think he can ever bump uglies with that attractive yet traitorous broad ever again. But Sindril says there's no time for wondering if you can ever penetrate a small princess ever again after she totally killed your sibling, because there's totally a giant fuck-off beast roaming around out there under the control of a crap comedian. And the monoliths are tearing the veil between worlds apart, which will totally bring around the apocalypse in a few days' time, so we need to destroy the main master monolith before that can happen. Or some shit. So they decide to jump back through their local monolith, what leads to the castle, to do a surprise counter coup against Baylor and the bad peeps. But naturally, as this is only episode 2, something goes horribly wrong, and the monolith sends them into some bizarro world with 2 moons and a surprise cameo from Cher. Whoops, I meant a giant ugly bug monster. And that's it. That's episode 2. Though my favourite part was where everything happened off screen. Like the opening massacre in the crack den, and Meldoff completing her story arc in the space of 2 scenes, where she defeats her arch nemesis in what I am presuming was a thrilling and epic battle that we'll now never see. And man, I also love how utterly original this show is. I mean, just when you think they've ripped off all of Tolkien's ideas, now we have budget Galadriel knockoffs and generational beef between dwarves and elves. Wowzers! So fresh and innovative. But anyway, that's the plot and there's your lot. Consider ringing that bell thing so you don't miss episodes 3 and 4 when they drop. And you say hello in the comments if you have time, and I'll see you in the next one.